Well, I think that I mean, part of the reason why it's such a long-standing thing today and why it's so significant is because of George Lucas's study and his education, and he decided to make it not just a typical, quote unquote sci-fi. What I love about what Harrison Ford said to defend Star Wars, someone was interviewing him and said like, "Oh, what do you feel about sci-fis?" And he said, "Well, first of all, Star Wars isn't a sci-fi. I consider it to be a space fantasy." And if you look at it like that, it looks up something along the lines of something that, Tolkien would write in his idea of fantasy, and there being like greater themes more than something that's just more on the emphasis of technology and juxtaposition against different human ideas. It's this idea that there's mythological sense in the story. And why I think that it's so significant is that George Lucas studied people like Joseph Campbell, who wrote on the ideas of heroes and the story of the hero's journey. And I think that he writes the hero's journeys in different ways in each of the characters. And one of the reasons why Star Wars is so significant and has touched so many people is that each of the characters have unique personalities and their own versions of their own hero story. Like Luke Skywalker, who is more of the people's hero, the civil hero, as would say, where he's kind of like bright and he's young, but he doesn't really come from anything, and he goes on this broad journey. And where there's Han Solo, and he is more of the outlaw hero, where he has a rough background, but he ends up becoming a general in this rebel cause. And then there's Leia, who is a person of nobility, but is able to relate to people who are of just any normal background. So I think part of the reason why Star Wars is so significant and resounds with so many people is that it connects to people because of its educational background, because of its ideas and its connecting themes. And that's my opinion overall for its major reason. But what do you think?
I completely agree. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of what you were talking about, like Joseph Campbell, the monomyth and whatnot, and just stuff. Hold on one second. I am getting myself acquainted for this kind of call. There we go. All right, so basically, but yeah, like going back into like what makes Star Wars so special to all of us is something that is reminiscent of, like, again, Luke Skywalker as a character. You look at this guy, this farm boy, this kid by all means, and he does something incredibly special, and he becomes a part of this larger journey that I think everyone at the time in '77 definitely wanted from their sci-fi. Because you look at all the other stuff, all the other kinds of sci-fi that was coming out at the time, and you have stuff that is, I don't want to say dry sci-fi, but George Lucas definitely pulled something interesting from, he pulled from things that most Americans hadn't seen at that point, which was Japanese cinema. You have Kurosawa, you have The Seventh Samurai, Hidden Fortress, you have all that stuff. And seeing how he was able to take everything that he learned at USC and kind of bring it together in one place was like, phenomenal. And I think the way that it affected filmmaking in general afterwards was also just incredible. What it means to me as someone who's grown up with it for so long, I mean, where do I even start? I have been watching Star Wars since I was like 2. I think, on my shelf right up there is from all the movies because I watch it so often. But I always ask myself, why? Why do I keep coming back to it? And I think the answer has to do with accessibility. It is the kind of story where you can jump in almost at any point and be instantly familiar with it. There's not, you have stuff like the opening crawl that explains where you're at, what's going on, and why everything is happening like it is. which I think is a great and brilliant way to do sci-fi, because not a lot of movies at that time, they expected you to come into it with this sense of like, oh, yeah, I know what's going on, but did you really? No. You had to be explained. And the way that it does that with just kind of having it be at the start is genius. I think that's great. And there we go. There's the Millennium Falcon as a background. That's the other thing about Star Wars, was that it was a very, the design aesthetics of the film, it made people want to be a part of it. You could do, like, it had this aesthetic of being lived in. A lot of sci-fi at the time was very much this beautiful, clean, stylistic, sterilized science fiction future. But George Lucas looked at that and said, no, how about we do, like you were saying, a lived-in, kind of like accessible kind of universe. And it was it was a very big success.
Yeah. Well, I think that's part of the huge reason why it is so successful is it finds the balance between escapism and relativity, where people can connect to it. I mean, obviously, you don't want to have characters who are all from nobility. You don't want to have them just be all princes and princesses. I mean, Farm Boy Luke is going to be like the home center. It's like, you know.
It gave people something to aspire towards, and I think that was something that was great. Like, you had Luke as this idealistic hero, and you got to watch his journey as it went along. But you also had characters like Han Solo that kids would want to be like, because he's this brave, brash kind of asshole. And then you had Princess Leia, who is this kick-ass leader of this rebellion, and like, you don't have that with a lot of other franchises or a lot of other series or films. And then, like, that just cemented its staying power. And then you have stuff like the recent movies where it's like trying to capture that feeling of those originals, but it never will. It never can, because it's like capturing lightning in a bottle.
Yeah, well, I saw this funny post on Twitter. Someone saying that, like, the newer movies are as if they were all a group project, but certain individuals did the different movies, so it all had different messages and stuff, and that's kind of, I mean,
that's a whole other argument. I think the biggest problem with the new movies is that there was no plan. I mean, there was no plan with Star Wars as the beginning, but I mean, there's no excuse. No excuse.
I mean, we could go on a whole different discussion about why and what we feel about the new movies and stuff, but I mean, I think that's something we could talk about right now that's still relevant is the newer movies and why it's still relevant today. And again, I think it's going back to like rich character development. I mean, it's good that they do connect from the characters that we know of from the past, and that helps the older generation. But of course, they're trying to market to this new generation. They're trying to do something new, and
I feel like one of the biggest problems is Disney doesn't know their audience. I feel like part of what they were trying to do is do something new and different and exciting. And then when people said, no, we don't want that, they went, yikes, we have to go back. We have to find, like, you know, we have to go back to the original trilogy. And it's like, I don't care. I love the original trilogy. I just don't want to see that again.
Again, you know? Exactly. Yeah. And that's the hard balance, is because you can see, like, with the Force Awakens, it's this, like, call back to the old. It's very similar to A New Hope. Yeah. Everyone thinks that. And then you get The Last Jedi, which is completely something new, way different, something that
by the way, I will defend that movie till I die.
Thank you. I am one of the few people who actually really like that movie. I love The Last Jedi.
I mean, again, I could go on for hours about why The Last Jedi is amazing, but
me too.
It becomes the kind of a thing where it's like, they had no plan, they had no idea, and so you end up with this 3-part saga, this 3-part trilogy that's trying to wrap up everything, but it doesn't. It doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't feel like it's going anywhere.
And go ahead.
No, that was I could again.
Part of the reason why they say it's just unplanned is, you know, the themes that George Lucas did, like with Vader being the sub-villain. He's not exactly the main villain of the story. He is a villain, but like he's not the head villain. There is someone above him. There is the Emperor. And, you know, at the end of the last movie for the Return of the Jedi, there's this resolve. He dies. He goes away. It's supposed to be balanced. And the new trilogy was supposed to like show this idea that there is it's not exactly balanced. You kill the bad guy, so the Force isn't balanced. But they didn't really talk about that, and I think that's what George Lucas wanted with these new ones. If he could have had a hold on this, I think he would have had something of this balance with the Force, where it's not exactly like we should give a bunch of power to the Jedi, or there should be a bunch of power on the Sith. I think there should have been some point where they came to this. Maybe we shouldn't have a bunch of support for either side. Maybe the Wills would prefer it to be this balance, and I think that's something they definitely could have shot at with the new movies, because that's something that has a purpose for something. If you're going to make a new movie,
it has a purpose, but it's also new and interesting. It's not just, hey, look, it's Return of the Jedi, but again,
don't
you want that?
Yeah.
No, I don't.